After venturing into the past, Shinra awakens to find another person has taken over his body. He then discovered that the cataclysm from 250 years ago altered reality itself. In this video, get ready for a fierce battle in Asakusa as a new threat emerges, an infernal doppelganger with the power to bring Tokyo to its knees. Can our heroes stop this mirror image menace before it reduces the entire city to ashes? Let's find out. Asakusa became the temporary covert headquarters of Company 8. Here, Licht was pondering what happened to Shinra. After the first pillar appeared, all his memories from the following 3 months disappeared, and during that interval, he became an entirely different person, a separate identity with a link to Adala. And as the pillars continued to appear, the world and Adala grew closer, which may have caused this change in identity. According to Captain Hibana, spontaneous human combustion was spurred by the assimilation of a doppelganger into oneself. These doppelgangers are supposedly another version of themselves that exists in Adala. Therefore, in the past few months, Shinra may have been controlled by his doppelganger. This made her think about another version of them existing in Adala. Because of that, she became curious about what Adala really is. Licht then asked if she had anything to add that would actually be useful to them. Hibana was annoyed by his comment and said that she hadn't heard any deep insight from him, calling him a filthy budget leech. Suddenly, Skop appeared from Licht's head. He joined the conversation and mentioned something about a tear in space. He asked what connection talking animals had to that. Licht said that Arthur also mentioned something about the personality in question. According to him, this resembled the rumors about Shinra while they were training. This means, says Hibana, that Shinra became whatever his public image was. But she wondered what hypothesis they could derive from this based on the information they had. They were curious about what would really happen when the 8th pillar appeared. On the other hand, Obi and Shinra were talking to each other. The captain asked his opinion about the covert headquarters. Didn't it sound more official than just a hideout? He asked. He invited him to sit beside him to relax for a while, and he complied. Obi explained that Vulcan had renovated that small house in Asakusa for them. Shinra simply commented that it made sense. When Obi asked if he had cooled off, he replied that he thought he had handled what happened to him, but it didn't seem quite real to him. According to the captain, he had gone so far off the rails. It was a shame he couldn't remember. Shinra became embarrassed and flustered with his awkward smile. The captain laughed heartily at his expression and confirmed that he was indeed the old Shinra. Shinra asked him to stop laughing, so Obi apologized. He said that Shinra had become such a hellion these past months. But, at the end of the day, he couldn't bring himself to hate him. Shinra replied that he was too kind. The captain said that because of that smile of his worries had been cleared up. He was happy that he had returned and hoped he would continue to fight with them. He extended his hand and said, "We're in this together." Shinra was pleased with this and answered, "Of course, Captain." In his thoughts, he realized the captain hadn't pushed him away but had simply accepted him. Even though he had become a matricide bastard, their captain hadn't abandoned him. No other person would go that far, except him. He really appreciated it and bowed his head, then expressed his gratitude. He said he was glad to fight under his command again. Reflecting on their situation, 3 months had passed and 5 pillars had already appeared. One of the Titanic Infernals reportedly appeared each time as well. Nevertheless, Hajime and the second were there to meet it. Aguro from Hajime took the lead for the interceptions, and they were reportedly successful. They thought he could easily handle Kurono. There were even rumors that they loaded Captain Honda into a Hajime cannon and blasted him straight at one of the giants. Shinra pondered this because he knew Aguro. He was the Hajime rookie who continued to rise through the ranks. He was known as a bastard who didn't mince his words. And that was also the reason why he became popular with citizens. They thought he was extremely honest. That was basically what was happening. Shinra appreciated his rundown. But according to him, there was one thing that Sister Iris mentioned that made him curious. She reportedly said that people were getting stronger whenever a new pillar appeared. The captain couldn't confirm this. Non-powered individuals like him and Iris didn't know anything about that. But Maki and Hinawa did feel that their powers were getting stronger. Because of this answer, Shinra realized that Iris hadn't yet mentioned anything about her ability to them. Obi added that from what he had heard, The biggest effect was on third generations who were already strong to begin with. Shinra was surprised by this. Obi asked about the dream he had recently. When Shinra asked if he thought it was related, he answered that Captain Shinmon had mentioned something. It was about his dream that also seemed real. On the outside that night, Benimaru could be seen drinking with his head lowered, eyes closed while smiling. Conro noticed this and was curious about why he was drinking under the moonlight. He thought he might have passed out already. When he called him Waka, he suggested he should brush his teeth and go to bed. He called out his name, then were shown a flashback. When he was still a child with Conro, they were just gazing at the sky and observing the moon. He said he preferred the moon over the sun. Conro was surprised and asked if he was only saying that because he couldn't use the Nichiren. The young Benimaru denied this. Conro said that if he always said things like that, he would surely get chewed out again. But he replied that wasn't what he meant. He just thought that the Akatsuki or Crimson Moon was cooler than the Nichiren. It was like a big fireworks show and more fitting for Asakusa's style. Conro fell silent before saying that the moon can only shine so bright, and it's difficult to make it shine at his level. Benimaru pondered what he said. Conro added that the moon is funny because when the sun's rays are gone, it will disappear. The Akatsuki was a double-edged sword, a fickle attack that couldn't do anything without trusty sunlight. Nevertheless, he put his hand on his head and said he could shine on his own. So, he should do as he was told and learn the Nichiren. He had no choice but to agree. Suddenly, someone called him a little shit and said they were about to begin. Benimaru gave him a nasty look. It turned out to be the Asakusa fire chief at that time, Shimon Hibachi. Conro just bowed his head along with Benimaru and said, "Yes, sir." You could see Benimaru was thrown around during training. Hibachi taunted him and asked if he thought he was cut out to be an Asakusa firefighter with moves like that. Because of this, he called him an idiot. Benimaru struggled to stand up and asked him to repeat what he said. Hibachi replied that he would say it as many times as needed. He called him an idiot again, then kicked him in the chest. On the sidelines, Conro could do nothing but watch, but his concern for Benimaru was evident. Hibachi kept kicking him repeatedly with his arms crossed, and Benimaru could do nothing but raise his hand to block the kicks. He insisted that Hibachi would acknowledge him. Hibachi replied that he would only believe it when he saw it. Again, he kicked him, and this time, it was so powerful that Benimaru was thrown to the other side and hit the wall there. Nevertheless, he tried to stand up again. Benimaru just stared at him while Hibachi used the EI chop, Form 7. Hibachi bent down and displayed the Nichiren, Sun Wheel. It was an incredibly powerful ability that Benimaru couldn't believe. The Sun Wheel's range was so vast, and Hibachi asked how long he would hide in the shadow of the moon. Afterward, the man taking care of Hina and Hika noticed him because he got it bad again. Conro asked if he would just lie there and cry all day. He was an Asakusa man, so he should act like one. Benimaru complained that it hurt so much. Conro took pity on him and carried him to take him to his room. But while being carried, he said he wouldn't hide anymore. Conro just replied, "Sure." Benimaru called Hibachi a son of a bitch and said he could kick his ass if he wanted to. Conro just said of course he could. No one could beat Benimaru, but he told him to stop being sarcastic. Returning to the present, Conro supported him and said he should pull it together and walk since he wasn't as light as he used to be. While Benimaru was holding on to him, he mentioned that he had another dream. The old man was there, along with the two of them. But it was very old, an old memory. He was still a little brat back then, but he seemed to be the same. Probably doesn't sound all that different now. Conro just smiled and replied that he could say that. Benimaru struggled to stand, so he held onto the wall for support. When he asked Conro if he still think he's just a brat who can't handle his liquor, he answered that was correct, and that he also didn't know how to quit gambling. Benimaru looked up and said maybe he still needed to act tougher. Conro clarified that he was already strong and didn't need to act tough anymore. Benimaru remembered that he had never beaten the old man Hibachi, and Conro didn't respond to that. He invited Conro to drink, but this was a sign for Conro that he was indeed drunk because he was smiling. The scene shifted to Joker's hideout where he was resting on the couch, sound asleep. In the Nether, the white-clad members continued to pray. They prayed that the lost souls would light up and scorch the earth. May the planet become a flaming sun. A throne of God continues on the revealed path of the evangelist. and all the white-clad said latum. In their midst was Haumea, using her ability. Liquid flowed down her face while performing this ritual. She said that the congregation of humanity's perception, the collective unconscious, was circling in her mind. Death, destruction, and the end. The place where all perception of humanity arrives, the Adala. Dark souls could be seen emerging from below. One of them rose up and crashed into others there. A demon emerged from them who resembled Hibachi. He stood with his arms crossed, while a pillar appeared beside him. There was also a demon perched on it with one eye. It was familiar, causing Joker to wake up, as it was apparently his dream and what he saw was Burns. Moving to the Special Fire Grand Cathedral 1, Huai-Yin said that the number of infernals seemed to be increasing, and they were also getting stronger. He thought this was an effect of the cataclysm. Kareem responded that the pillars they were seeing might be the real-life versions of what they had seen earlier at St. Raphael's Convent. Therefore, he told their captain, Huai-Yin, that they should stay on guard. Huai-Yin wasn't accustomed to being called captain. In his opinion, Lieutenant Onyango would be a better successor. Onyango stopped him from saying this. According to him, he was just a washed-up old man out of retirement. And even if they made him captain, the position would surely come to him soon enough. So Huai-Yin said he would do his best. They gathered the other members of Company 1. Huai-Yin bowed and said that even though Captain Burns had left them, it didn't mean that Company 1 needed to change. The cataclysm, white-clads, and all the fears troubling the Empire's citizens were things they should fight until the end. The faith of Company 1 and their faith would not change and would not be shaken. He encouraged everyone to fight until their last breath, for God and for the people, then uttered latum. Kareem listened attentively, agreed, and everyone said latum. In Huai-Yin's mind, Captain Burns might have left them, but Company 1 would not change, and it was his duty to ensure that would happen. Just then, the cathedral bell rang, and Kareem said that was the rallying call. In Tokyo, an infernal was asking for help because it was too hot. Everyone was in chaos because of its presence, and they were running away. A woman fell to the ground, and before long, she too burst into flames. Because of that, there were now 2 infernals in the area. The woman was gradually transforming. To the rescue came the Special Fire Force Company 1, and they evacuated the citizens. A firefighter there reported that there was a chain reaction of 3 infernals, and all of them could speak. Huai-Yin was troubled because no infernal had spoken again since Miyamoto, and now they were appearing all at once. The effect of the cataclysm was really growing severe. Kareem took out his instrument. He said those infernals were too powerful. Therefore, they needed to move out and deliver the last rites. The captain said that Lieutenant Onyango would lead the evacuation of civilians. Under his leadership, Team Onyango followed him. Huai-Yin called Kanyango to join them. The young girl agreed and said she would protect their captain, but Huai-Yin replied that Kareem would serve as his escort. He wished that she would just focus on herself. Kanyango was surprised by what he said, while Kareem had nothing more to add. The young girl prepared herself, but Huai-Yin told her to try to control her excitement, taking deep breaths and all. Suddenly, the flaming infernals appeared before them. They all spoke about the last rites. They pleaded not to be given last rites, instead asking for help. Huai-Yin was shocked by this, and Kareem questioned what they were saying. Again, the infernal begged them not to kill them. Suddenly, its foot got stuck, giving Kanyango an opportunity to kick it in the face, causing it to fall back. Huai-Yin mentioned that they needed to free the infernals from their suffering in the flames. However, what they were saying was making it difficult. Kanyango continued her relentless attacks on the infernals. She was determined because of Huai-Yin's statement that Company 1 would not change. Therefore, she said she would just charge ahead. Kareem tried to stop her, telling her not to rush and be reckless. When Kanyango attacked, the infernal didn't back down and countered her move. It hit Kanyango with flaming fire and approached to grab and finish her. Fortunately, someone helped her escape, and that was their captain, Huai-Yin. He used his 3rd-generation technique, Lantern Fist, to strike the infernal using just 2 of his fingers. He made the sign of the cross and then said latum. After defeating that one, Huai-Yin checked on Kanyango. She replied that she was okay. Kareem hit her on the head with ice and told her that her head needed cooling down. He said she was exactly like Rekka. He was annoyed that he had to babysit another hothead who just rushes in without thinking. Anyway, The captain said there were only 2 left. And as Kanyengo said, Company 1 would not change. The Infernals again mentioned that they are hurting, yet still pleaded not to be killed. The captain said they would free them from the flames by delivering the last rites as painlessly as they could. Kanyengo rushed them, so Kareem said they should begin. The Infernal questioned why they could kill them without hesitation. A horned Infernal appeared, which shocked the captain. It effortlessly attacked the 2 Infernals there and tore them to pieces. The Company 1 members couldn't believe what they were seeing. They were extremely surprised by the appearance of a demon Infernal. The scene then shifted to Asakusa, where Benimaru was just in the tower. Concern was evident on his face when he suddenly sensed something. Back to Huoyin, he noticed something unusual about the demon Infernal they were facing. Suddenly, there was a rumbling around them. Kanyengo was worried about the earthquake. In Kareem's mind, this might be because another pillar was appearing. The demon Infernal suddenly jumped and mentioned something about the pillar. Kanyengo then said that this demon was escaping. It quickly left the area, and Huoyin noticed that its direction was toward Asakusa. His suspicions were correct, and another pillar emerged in that location. People were troubled because this was the 6th pillar to appear. They questioned how long this would continue to happen to them. They were concerned about what would happen to Tokyo. The 6th one had emerged, but there was another one accompanying it. Captain Obi couldn't believe it when he found out that they appeared in Sumida and Tama Bays. He was shocked that 2 pillars emerged simultaneously. The Company 8 members were at their hideout in Asakusa, and Hinawa mentioned that for each new pillar, the Haijima and the Imperial Army were intercepting and taking care of it. However, they didn't have the manpower for 2 at once. Obi said that the 7th one was at Sumida Bay. It was very close to Asakusa, so it was time for them to move. However, Licht reminded them that they were enemies of the Empire. Because of that, he couldn't advise them to just move freely right now. But for Shinra, this wasn't the time to do nothing. Meanwhile, Benimaru and Joker were quiet. Joker called Benimaru Mr. Toughest and asked his opinion. He replied that it was the Empire's fight and had nothing to do with him. Conro intervened from behind and wanted to talk to him. When he asked why, Conro explained that a young boy had reported seeing a demon from the sky from one of the watchtowers, and it had passed through Asakusa. He was about to say something else, which worried Benimaru. Like the previous Infernals before, when the 6th one appeared, a Titanic Infernal was spotted with it. But what emerged with the 7th was different because there was no Titanic Infernal. All that was seen was a human-sized Infernal. It was observed appearing only in the air near that pillar. As they looked at it, the 2 seemed to be thinking the same thing when they saw its appearance. Benimaru knew it was his old man. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Therefore, he told everyone that he would handle the 7th pillar alone. Obi was surprised by his decision to leave. Joker became curious about what had entered his mind to suddenly decide that. He answered that no one should move there. To clarify, it was his fight. While the alarm was sounding, Director Aguro was already there saying he was getting somewhat used to what they were doing. At his side stood Kurono, who mentioned that he didn't like strong ones. He suggested leaving the Titanic Infernal to Company 2. Although, while facing it, he said he couldn't imagine ever getting used to seeing things like that. Aguro replied that it was the end of the world after all. On the side, the fire soldiers prepared the super headbutt cannon. Captain Honda told them to hurry because another pillar had appeared. One of them responded that they shouldn't worry about the 7th pillar anymore. When asked why, they had received news from Company 7. They were told not to interfere and that Company 7 would handle it. Honda couldn't believe this. He couldn't accept that he should trust those he called proto-nationalists. While the 2 were talking, the Titanic Infernal attacked from the water. It released a powerful explosion from its hand. So Captain Honda ordered that it shouldn't be allowed to reach the coast. From behind, Director Aguro said that the report they received was accurate. Captain Shinmon from the 7th was already moving out. Therefore, they should just focus on what was in front of them now. So he boarded the cannon and said he would show those proto-nationalists how they do things. They prepared the super headbutt cannon and loaded Captain Hondo into it. Then they locked in on the target, which was the enormous Infernal. Meanwhile, Benimaru could be seen using the Matoi to fly. He prepared to face his master, Hibachi, once again. And in just a moment, he was there before him, who greeted him by calling him a goddamned idiot. Benimaru asked why he had returned, calling him an old son of a bitch. However, He was no longer the same as before because he was now an infernal with the ability to rise into the air. He just smiled and called him by his name. In Sumida Bay, off Asakusa, in the sky close to the seventh pillar, in a place of a titanic infernal, there was the demon, Shinmon Hibachi. In the sky to the west, there was the captain of Special Fire Force 7, Shimon Benimaru, and Hibachi said there he was. It was a moment of confrontation above the ocean, as Hibachi grinned menacingly at his opponent. While Benimaru said he was damned, because his opponent was Hibachi, and he said that Benimaru had grown a bit taller, calling him a little shit. Benimaru did not answer that, and Hibachi added that he was still small, and Benimaru asked him why he came back. Hibachi had only one answer, and that was destruction, uninhibited destruction, and it was the destruction of Tokyo. Then, Benimaru used Ei Chop Form 1 and unleashed it on Hibachi, but he blocked it, and Benimaru followed it with Fire Moon, which disturbed the ocean as well. On the other hand, Kareem and Huoyin were watching the battle between the two, and it was Kareem who pointed it out. At that moment, Lieutenant Conroe also arrived, telling Hibana to hurry up, but she replied that she was wearing heels. Kareem saw them, and he seemed surprised that they were there too. Conroe said he had doubts, but it was really true that Shinmon Hibachi was Benimaru's opponent, and according to Hibana, it was a doppelganger. Huoyin asked if that demon was an infernal, and Conroe replied that that person was the one who loved Asakusa more than anyone else. He said he was the central figure of the former Asakusa Fire Department, Shinmon Hibachi. Huoyin said he had heard of him, because he was responsible for Asakusa before the Special Fire Department was formed. Yes, said Conroe, and he looked exactly like their master. Kareem asked if he was telling him that the monster fighting Benimaru was his master and a doppelganger. Then, we returned to the battle, where Hibachi was smiling, and he used a skill that sent Benimaru flying with great force and great distance, making him crash into the water. Hibachi followed that with a double fire laser attack, while Benimaru was flying using his Matoi. In the next scene, Hibachi's attack had hit the port, and Benimaru couldn't do anything about it, looking worried for the people there. He asked Hibachi what he thought he was doing, and he replied that Benimaru was as green as ever, and asked if he had come there to cry. Then, Hibachi used Ei Chop Form 4, and that shocked Benimaru, who told him not to do that. Benimaru charged at Hibachi because of that, and gave him a powerful elbow, but he blocked it. Benimaru was very annoyed, and his reaction was exactly the same as when he was a child, so Hibachi mentioned that he hadn't changed since he found him. Because of that, Benimaru punched his arm to remove his block, and gave him an extremely powerful two-finger attack. Hibachi said that all Benimaru had done was grow a little taller, and he was nothing but a wet behind the ears disappointment. Benimaru replied that he had dreamed about Hibachi, and he never imagined that he would return to haunt him. Hibachi asked if Benimaru was still being a burden to Conroe, so he asked him what he had said. Hibachi replied that Benimaru lacked spine, and he should have been in charge of Asakusa when he keeled over. He added that he could tell from looking at Benimaru that he still couldn't execute the true Nichiren, and that was the reason why he crawled out from hell. Benimaru wondered why hell, because he thought Hibachi meant Adala, and he said he recognized his Ei Chop style anywhere, and it was exactly like the real Hibachi's, but he's still just his doppelganger. The doppelganger replied that he thought it didn't matter to Benimaru whether he was a doppelganger or not, because he seemed to be forgetting that he, Hibachi, would show him the true Nichiren. According to Benimaru, there was indeed no doubt that what the doppelganger was doing was Hibachi's Nichiren, and it was shown surrounded by a ring of fire. He repeated again that just by looking at Benimaru, he could tell that he still couldn't perform a proper Nichiren to save his life. The captain of the 7th remained silent, and Hibachi added that after all this time, Benimaru still couldn't figure out how to handle Asakusa without wetting himself, so he asked him if he hadn't learned anything from him. The captain countered with a question, asking if Hibachi had forgotten that he had died, and he replied that it was just part of being an Asakusa fireman. He was also pretty sure that Benimaru was to blame for his death, so he asked him how he had the nerve to bring that up with him. Benimaru said it was just like what Hibachi always said, "You goddamned idiot." A flashback occurred as Benimaru was saying this, and his younger version asked what on earth was Hibachi doing, because all that happened was that he got into a fight. Hibachi replied, while kicking Benimaru that the problem was the type of fights he was getting into. Benimaru asked who gives a shit, because he would beat up anyone who pisses him off. Because of that, Hibachi kicked him again, calling him a goddamned idiot again. Benimaru was hurt by that, because why did Hibachi act that way, even though he was telling him not to fight? At that moment, he saw a man carrying 2 children, and he was asked by him if he had been beaten up by Hibachi again. Benimaru recognized him as Shinbita, and the 2 children seemed to want to be carried by him, and they were delighted playing around his back. Shinbita asked him what happened and if it was the same old story. He replied yes, and he said he couldn't figure out what Hibachi was talking about. He said he wasn't like Hikahina because he was just an adopted child, and he was done being Hibachi's stand-in successor. Shinbita said that Benimaru is the real deal, and there wasn't much he could do about it. Benimaru replied no, because he was just a goddamned idiot. Shinbita said that Benimaru's power was special, and he's a lot more than just some stray dog. According to Benimaru, that was what Shinbita thought, but to Hibachi, he was just a goddamned idiot. Shinbita said they couldn't tell what was running through his mind, and he only knew that 2 other people agreed with him. He wondered who those 2 were, and they turned out to be the 2 children. Shinbita added that there were many different kinds of strength, but being strong was an incredible thing, and Hikahina are just babies, and they could already see it, and Benimaru had a way of attracting people to him. He thought about that, and in the next scene, he was practicing, and in the midst of all that, Conro arrived asking him if he was working hard, but he replied that it was his punishment for fighting. Conro asked him who he had beaten up, and he replied someone who had pissed him off. Conro said that from what he heard, Kantaro was badly beaten, and Benimaru replied that he had pissed him off. Conro asked if that was the fight that he wanted to make his own, which made him think about it. In the next scene, there were 2 men arguing, because according to one man, anything created will eventually be destroyed because it's fate. But for the other guy, he said the other person had broken it, so he should pay for it. According to the bystanders, Kantaro was at it again, but Benimaru arrived and told the 2 to get out of his way. They were surprised by what he said, and Benimaru repeated that they were blocking the way, so they should move aside. However, Kantaro told Benimaru not to interfere and to just leave. Because of that, Benimaru hit him with a very powerful punch, and he said that Kantaro had started the fight, and besides that, he had broken Tasuk's staff. Conro said that Benimaru was extremely strong, and it wouldn't be long before he became stronger than him. The rich only get richer, and the poor only get poorer, so being strong gave Benimaru many extras, like fame, respect, and fear. He said it might not be fair, but that's how the world worked. Benimaru could hate all he wanted, but that wouldn't give up his strength. It came with a lot of baggage, but what Hibachi was trying to tell Benimaru was not to be careless in exercising his power. He wanted Benimaru to know when he was just showing off, so he asked if the fight earlier was really Benimaru's fight, to which he seemed to have no answer. Conro added that he wasn't trying to be cryptic, and he was just saying that Benimaru should try to be more sophisticated, but for the young heir of Asakusa, he didn't get it because of that. Conro drank his drink, and he said Benimaru should figure it out himself, which confused him more, while Conro was thoroughly enjoying his drink. He said there was nothing like making tea for oneself, because every man there likes their own tea best. According to Benimaru, Conro wasn't making him feel better, but Conro replied that he was probably the most thick-headed person he had ever met. Either Benimaru or the master, Hibachi. In the next scene, in Hibachi's room, he was telling Conro not to interfere in matters that weren't his business, and he replied that he understood. However, Conro argued that it was just that Hibachi couldn't convey the message he wanted to convey because he wasn't one with words. Hibachi replied that Benimaru would be spoiled because of that, because he needed to be beaten up until he learned, as that was the only way he would learn. Conro asked if he would still do that, even if he might end up raising a monster. Hibachi didn't agree and said it was more like raising an absolute idiot. But Conro should understand that they, the Asakusa firefighters, were not like the fire soldiers, who preached divine protection or whatever, and the type of person he thought could handle Asakusa was an absolute goddamned idiot. Conro asked if only a goddamned idiot could handle Asakusa, and Hibachi replied yes. He said they weren't like the fire soldiers and their holy soul, and Conro seemed to have no answer to that. Hibachi added that the fire soldiers killed under the protection of the sun god, and the point was that the god wouldn't take responsibility for it, but they took lives with their own two hands. He also said he knew that the god wouldn't clean up their mess, and they couldn't put responsibility on anyone but themselves. They just had to bear the burden of killing people. So who could handle that but a goddamned idiot? Conro thought about that, and he was about to say that Benimaru was that person, but Hibachi beat him to it, saying that Benimaru got it in his own way, and he already knew how heavy the burden was, which was why he was backing away. Conro pointed out that Benimaru still couldn't use the Oniii-Chan. So Hibachi told the story that when the one and only woman he had loved and would love died, she didn't leave him his own brat behind, so he was forced to adopt Benimaru. Conro said quite the pup was adopted by Hibachi, who said that just as Conro said, they couldn't let Benimaru become a monster. Conro said that Benimaru thought he was just an idiot, and Hibachi replied yes. If that's what he believed, he would just let him believe it, because he needed to realize it himself, and Conro shouldn't tell him. When Benimaru could do a proper Oniii-Chan, he himself would tell him. So Conro replied yes, master. In the next scene, a fire had started, quickly surrounding the houses, because an infernal had appeared, so the fire department prepared their matoys. They were ready, and of course the next one to manage the department, Benimaru, was with them. They were going to fight a female infernal, and according to one man, her name was Sako, so Hibachi told them to stand back. However, someone stopped Hibachi, and it was a child saying that his mother wasn't doing anything wrong, so they shouldn't kill her. Hibachi asked if he was Sako's child, and he pleaded to just let his mother go, but Hibachi just apologized because it had to be done. The child continued to plead, saying his mother had raised him alone, and he was old enough to pay her back, so they should just let her go. The child's pleas didn't work because Hibachi just told him to stand back as he might get hit. So Benimaru held him back. He pleaded with him, saying he understood what was happening to him, and asked if Benimaru wanted him to be an orphan too. Then, Hibachi faced the infernal, and Benimaru told the child to just deal with it. Hibachi punched the infernal very hard in the chest area, creating a hole in that part, and the infernal was defeated. The child was shocked by what happened, and as he was realizing what had happened to his mother, his reaction suddenly filled with anger. In the next scene, Hibachi mentioned the words 9,568 people and asked Benimaru if he knew what that number was. Benimaru said yes, and that was the total number of infernals killed by the Asakusa Hikashi. Hibachi said they had killed 9,568 people, and today, they had killed 9,569 people. On the other hand, Benimaru remained silent, and Hibachi added that he had killed 278 with his own hands, and he had to live carrying that, and he would continue to kill. Asakusa was his town, but he couldn't do it for his whole life. So how long would Benimaru run? So he should find his resolve, the kind that would allow him to carry the death of people. That was what it meant to be an Asakusa Hikashi. Then, he told Benimaru to leave, and not to come back until he found the resolve that could carry the weight of the sun. In the next scene, Benimaru was sitting on the roof, thinking about being responsible for people's deaths. Only one person could bear the weight of the sun, a person who could do the unthinkable and spit in the face of the people's sham god. There was no god in Asakusa, so the head of the firefighters is responsible for everyone, both the living and the dead. Then, we were shown the different forms of Onii-Chan. There was Form 1 Fire Moon, Form 2 Moonlight, Form 3 Daybreak, Form 4 Red Sun, Form 5 Sunset, Form 6 Dusk, and Form 7 the Oniii-Chan. According to Hibachi, as long as he was the leader of the Hikashi, Asakusa was his town. On the other hand, Benimaru thought that to bear the weight of the sun, he needed to take all the emotions of the lives he took, such as sadness, anger, and hate, and replace them like the sun. Then, he asked how much longer he would let Hibachi carry him, and did he think he was running away, because if he wanted resolve, it was with him, ever since he was adopted by the Hikashi. He seemed to be holding the entire town, and he said Asakusa was his town. In the next scene, we returned to Hibachi walking, and he asked if Benimaru had found his resolve. Maybe he had said too much, and he called Benimaru a goddamned idiot. Then, someone was running toward Hibachi, and suddenly he jumped, and the leader of Asakusa seemed to sense something. We were then shown that the child of the infernal he had killed earlier seemed to have stabbed him. The child removed the knife he had stabbed Hibachi with, causing him to sit down against the wall, bleeding. The child was in tears, as if not knowing why he had done it, while Hibachi was extremely weak. The child said he hadn't done anything wrong, and he just did what Hibachi did. The old man replied to him, just as he had said, "You kill, you get killed." According to the child, all adults looked up to Hibachi, but he couldn't understand it, so he asked what gave him the right to take people's lives. Hibachi replied that he didn't understand it either, and there was nothing honest about leading the Asakusa Hikaishi. It just meant you were an officially licensed idiot. And after saying that, Hibachi finally passed, and someone saw them, so people arrested the child. In the next scene, the fire department was chanting "Saya Soya" while waving their matois. A woman was crying to Benimaru because her husband had died, and he replied that he would give Taichi one last farewell, and he would join the others to send him off, and he would give his all. Then, he threw the matoi, which destroyed many buildings. The people cheered because of that, while the wife was crying, and Benimaru said that was for Taichi, and he wanted to hear them all shouting, so they should put their backs into it. The people continued to cheer, and Shinbita said the Hikaishi was pretty wild under Waka's, aka Benimaru's lead, and according to Conro, he guessed it could be called a proto-nationalist ceremony of sorts. Benny's way of seeing someone off. Shinbita replied that only Waka could do something like that, and he couldn't understand why he didn't want to be captain. Conro said no kidding, and he thought it was because Benimaru had never received recognition from Hibachi, so they just had to nominate him themselves, and he told his companions to shout. In the next scene, we return to the present, and Conro wanted Benimaru to show Hibachi that he had been carrying Asakusa since his death, and all that's left to bear is for Benimaru to bear the true Nichiren. He had a serious look on his face, and so did Hibachi, and it wasn't long before the doppelganger charged. He threw a devastating knee at Benimaru, but he blocked it. However, he was still sent flying far away, and Hibachi asked how long Benimaru would mope over his death. The captain of the 7th replied that Hibachi was the one who dropped dead, and he used an Oniie-Chop form. On the other hand, Hibachi prepared to attack, and he used an Oniie-Chop first form, Kagetsu or Fire Moon in English, and the shockwaves resulting from their simultaneous attacks were extremely powerful. They both felt it, and Benimaru used Form 3, while Hibachi used Form 5. Akabano or Daybreak in English was the form Benimaru used, while Sokujitsu or Sunset was for Hibachi. A double slash attack was the result of their attacks, and it created a hole in the clouds due to the strength of its impact. Benimaru was thrown into the sea as a result, due to the strength of Hibachi's attack, but his matoi caught him. Then he asked Hibachi if he could see how much stronger he'd become since the day he died, and he challenged him to come at him. Hibachi replied that the only thing that had grown up was Benimaru's mouth. On the other hand, Conro and the others had noticed the waves getting stronger, so Kareem asked what that fight would turn into, and if the waves always looked like that. According to Hibana, the power of their flames was drawing Adala even closer, and the waves of Adala affected theirs. Conro said it was the same with Hibachi, because he was always strong, but even he shouldn't be able to match up to the Benimaru of today. That was the master that Asakusa saw. Though Hibachi met a bitter end, he was the focus of so much fear and respect. Then, he called out to Benimaru and said he still had something he wasn't trying. The captain heard him and smiled, asking Hibachi if he had gone to so much effort to bring himself back to the world. Hibachi suddenly seemed nervous, and Benimaru added that he had something he wanted to show him, and at that moment, he would put him down. In the next scene, the other members of the Hikaishi arrived, and they called for Lieutenant Conro. Shinbita asked him where the two were, so he pointed to where they were. Shinbita looked in the direction Conro pointed at, and his jaw dropped at what he saw. It was a series of explosions in the air, the result of the rapid attacks from Benimaru and Hibachi. The battle between the two was at a standstill, with neither of them having the upper hand. A Hikaishi member said that was Waka and the Master, and Shinbita said they were both the pride of Asakusa. Two gods of proto-nationalism fighting in the Empire's skies, and one might think they owned the place. The entire Hikaishi cheered while the two continued to fight, and Hibachi mockingly asked Benimaru what was wrong and if he couldn't defeat him. After saying that, he delivered another slash attack, which Benimaru blocked, and he replied that it wasn't every day that he came to their world, so it would be rude to kick him out just like that. Then, he asked Hibachi what he thought about some tea while attacking him, which sent him flying. He immediately charged using his Matoi, shouting, and used Ie Chop Form 5, Sokujitsu, or Sunset in English. However, Hibachi used Akabano or Daybreak, which resulted in another stalemate attack, and they both used Kagetsu or Fire Moon simultaneously. Then, they prepared to attack again, and they used Form 2, Geku or Moonlight, which resulted in a bright explosion, which Huiyin said was incredible, while it was blinding for Kareem. Benimaru also seemed blinded by it, and was clearly affected, so Hibachi called out to him, saying where he was. He used Form 4 on him, Sekijutsu or Burning Sunday. He told him to scatter into ashes, due to the extreme power of the attack, which almost split the ocean. According to Conro, it was ridiculous, because the shock and heat are carving a hole in the sea. He said nothing would remain, not in the face of flames like that. However, he said even Hibachi knew, and in the next scene, after the master's attack, Benimaru was surrounded by smoke, while Hibachi was grinning. Conro said that Benimaru was the child of the heavens, Kagutsuchi, the Shinto god of fire. Any fire, no matter the source, was his ally. On the other hand, Huiyin was amazed because Benimaru had absorbed such an attack, and he emerged completely untouched, while Kareem was asking what had happened. Hibana asked how Benimaru could be so strong, and Conro replied that there was no rhyme or reason to strength and weakness, and no one in Asakusa wasted time wondering why Benimaru was strong. The strong are strong, and as for Benimaru, he was just strong. Then, we returned to the two, and Hibachi pointed out that it seems Benimaru was still a monster. And he replied that he had something he always wanted to ask him. Benimaru removed the kimono he was wearing, which seemed to shock Conro. Hibachi wondered what he was doing, as Benimaru appeared to be bowing down to him. Then, he said that when Hibachi died, he followed in Conro's footsteps, and many things happened, such as the Hikeishi becoming Special Fire Force 7, and him gaining the privilege of leading them. He knew he was a burden to Hibachi, but he was there that day, and he was there to fight. Conro seemed to know what was going to happen, while Benimaru was asking Hibachi to watch over his Hikeishi way, and he said he wouldn't bring shame to the name he had given him, Shinmon. Hibachi grinned because of that, while Conro seemed worried. Then, Hibachi asked if Benimaru was ready to kill him, and he replied that it had been a pleasure. Conro was surprised by what he heard, and he told his fellow Hikeishi to get to it. Some shouted Seiya Soya, while waving the Matois, while others were drumming, and some were setting off fireworks. Huiyin asked what they were doing, and Kareem said they were just goofing off. For Conro, what they were doing wasn't enough, and Hibachi asked if that was Benimaru's Hikeishi, who was apologizing to his comrades because Hibachi had returned since he hadn't actually grown up. They needed to put Hibachi's mind at ease and send him back, so they should show him how the Hikeishi do things. In the next scene, Conro along with his other companions were hyping themselves up. Benimaru and Conro gave each other a look of appreciation, as their other companions told Benimaru that they were leaving their master Hibachi to him now. While saying this, they threw the Matoi they were holding, and it rained down on Hibachi. He called Benimaru a little brat and asked him what trouble he was starting now. The captain of the 7th apologized for making Hibachi wait so long, so he asked him to let him show his Nichiren. Then, Benimaru used Ei Chop Form 7, the Nichiren or Sun Wheel. Hibachi was stunned by what he was seeing, and the Hikeishi members continued setting off fireworks that exploded near Benimaru, who said the words, "Here I come." Benimaru attacked, alarming Hibachi, because of the attack's overwhelming power. Hibachi had no choice but to receive the attack, and he thought that light was undoubtedly the Nichiren. With the Nichiren now behind Benimaru, he was like Akala himself, and that was it, an Asakusa Hikeishi. The other Hikeishi members were cheering, and they cheered for Waka and the Master, and they continued setting off fireworks. Hibachi asked what that was, since they were just goofing off, and he clearly didn't like it. He added that it really does seem like something Benimaru would do. It's his resolve, and his Nichiren. Benimaru replied that he was sorry to tell him, but that was indeed what he always preferred. Hibachi said he was a goddamned idiot and asked if he was trying to rule both the sun and moon. He released Nichiren Akatsuki on Hibachi's body. This attack created a moon bathed in the Nichiren that made it grew in even deeper crimson. And as Hibachi gradually faded, he said that Shinmon Benimaru's Hikeshi really went all out, which seemed to have made him proud. Benimaru thanked him for everything, and Hibachi replied, "Not bad," with a grin on his face as he completely exploded. In the aftermath, Huiyin and Karim looked completely shocked, while Conro was calling Benimaru, who was descending to where they were. After landing, Conro immediately asked if Hibachi was dead, and Benimaru said yes. He added that he gave everything he had, the best send-off he could manage. Conro understood that, and Benimaru said that Hibachi treated him like a goddamned idiot until the end. Nevertheless, he always believed he would see him again, and he thought that idiot was his way of approving of him. Conro smiled, and Benimaru added that the Nichiren was really something else. Conro was teary-eyed, and he said it was not bad, so Benimaru asked him why he was crying. He answered that both Benimaru and Hibachi were stubborn fools, so he was crying for him. Benimaru sighed and said he was counting on Conro, and while he was saying that, we are shown a crescent moon with a creepy smile. Karim and Captain Hibana couldn't believe what they saw, a moon that looked like a cartoon. Huiyin also noticed that the sea seemed to have returned to normal. Once again, Karim was shocked by what happened to the moon. Hibana said that because of the ferocity of Benimaru's battle, the Adala had been drawn closer, transforming the very sea. It even managed to change the shape of the moon itself. Conro asked if Benimaru was the cause of this, but he replied not to blame him for it. The people of Asakusa were delighted with the moon's appearance because for them, Mr. Moon was smiling at them. And so Conro was surprised by their reaction to it. Benimaru then said they would drink sake that night while being watched by the moon, and the men from Asakusa were excited about this. Meanwhile, Hibana wondered why everyone seemed so relaxed despite the moon's strange expression. She said she had never seen a moon like that before. But after a moment, she realized that this was how they had always drawn the moon. That was their perception of the moon. Suddenly, Licht appeared before her with his face completely covered in hair. He said that this was clearly an effect of the cataclysm. Hibana was very shocked by his appearance. However, Licht told her that because he was wanted, she should just call him Dr. Marimo, and she complied. Marimo is a moss ball or type of algae. Conro asked what was perfectly clear about that. But Hibana also asked him about the difference between the doppelganger and his master. He answered that its personality and looks were exactly the same. When he met his own doppelganger, it was the same. But when he thought about Hibachi's aura earlier, he wanted to destroy Tokyo. And he knew his master, who, although brute, did not like mindless destruction. Dr. Marimo added that the cataclysm was the unification of the world of human perception. But the objective of the White Clad was to ignite the world in flames. That's also what Rekka said, Huiyin added. If they were to assume that Adala was a world of perception and the cataclysm was trying to transform their world into that, then why did the White Clad's mission not seem to align with this? Hibana thought that Adala was an assembly of human ideation and the culmination of human perception. If that was the White Clad's goal, then that culmination could be death. With this realization, Karim understood that they really were one and the same. Huiyin was troubled because only one pillar remained before their world merged with Adala. And Licht said that at that point, their world would truly be destroyed. Conro was also concerned about this, and Benimaru thought that if it was going to be destroyed anyway, then he should be the one to do it. Conro replied that their master had almost done that, so he should stop making such jokes. He couldn't imagine what would happen if his doppelganger appeared. Switching to the other side, the fire force was rushing to retrieve the Honda missile. Corona was in the water and extremely annoyed. He said that at first, he thought it would split into two, but then it became 64 pieces. This was why he disliked powerful beings. Director Aguro remarked that if only Company 2 had been there, the town would surely have been destroyed. Fortunately, they had come. While Corona was coming ashore, he replied that once the infernal is split, the little ones become weak. So he enjoyed himself too. They then noticed that Company 7 had thoroughly cleaned up another pillar. Kurono complained about why the other guys couldn't just have done all the work, since that guy called the strongest loves to fight tough guys. Aguro responded that he might also be targeted someday. While looking up, Aguro mentioned that only one pillar remained. He was curious about what would happen when it appeared. Would there be demons or fire? Kurono told him to shut up, but Aguro just replied that would be deducted from his salary. So Kurono answered that he was the only demon there. The scene shifted to the city, where civilians were walking. One person said that was the seventh pillar. It seemed the cataclysm was progressing without any problems, and his companion agreed. The world would surely be destroyed, whether he was there or not. These two turned out to be Ero and Sho in civilian clothes. Sho wore a hat and scarf, while Ero no longer had anything covering her face. People were delighted with Sho's appearance because he looked like an angel. Sho was surprised and annoyed at this, thinking he had been fitting in perfectly on the surface. Ero then asked if she should assassinate them to avoid suspicion, but he answered not yet. He mentioned his family, sibling, and mother. Before the world was destroyed, he wanted to learn about them first. The two went straight to the Shinjuku regional office. Sho was curious if he could really find his family records there. He and his mother were presumed dead 12 years ago, but he thought he might learn something about them if he checked the records. However, Ero pointed out that they both didn't exist in the surface world, so how could they request records there? Sho replied that he had no interest in dealing with red tape. He asked if she had forgotten his power. He would just stop time and steal it. He just asked Ero to wait there since it wouldn't take long. And indeed, in the next scene, they were in a park and Sho was holding a paper. When Ero asked what it was, he answered that it was his family register. And as he thought, he was registered as dead there. He paused when he saw his mother's name, Mari Kusakabe. He was puzzled as he examined the file carefully. When Ero asked what the problem was, he replied that his father's name wasn't listed there. A moment later, Sho could be seen facing one of the Fire Defense Agency mascots. It gave him a balloon with his face printed on it. Sho was amazed by this. On the side, he noticed children riding scooters and asking each other what they wanted to do. Even there, he was impressed because he had no such childhood memories. Ero called for his attention repeatedly. She said she had found where the hospital was, so Sho told her well done. They next headed to Holy Soul University Hospital. Since Sho's father's name wasn't written in the family register, he thought the hospital might have a record of it. Ero asked if he would stop time again to get that record, and he said yes. Ero was surprised that he could still do this even without the evangelist's grace. Sho thought it was an effect of the proximity to Adala. Suddenly, Sho vanished like a bubble, which worried her. She wondered if he was already at the hospital, but he had only moved behind her before saying goodbye as he left. Ero hadn't expected this because it was rare for him to play tricks. Again, he obtained the file he wanted without any difficulty. When Ero asked what he found, he answered nothing. It wasn't listed in his birth record either. Ero was puzzled that no one knew who he was. She was curious if his mother was single when he gave birth to him. Sho thought so, but when they carefully observed the paper, they were shocked to notice that his mother had been examined for a virgin birth. This meant there was a chance she had conceived without intercourse. Sho was curious why they would perform such an exam. Ero said it was the first time she had heard about it, whether above or below the surface. If it was true, the answer might be in the past, Sho replied. They needed to find a repository of old newspapers. He thought they should go to the Imperial Library next, but he doubted they would find it easily. Ero suggested searching in the area where his family used to live. They could look at the community center there, which might have old notices from that time. Sho paused to think when she mentioned the community center. The two then went straight to the Shinjuku Community Center. Sho wondered why they had to go inside when he could just steal what they needed again. But Ero thought it would be better to talk to someone who remembered something about this. A staff member there asked if they were looking for a notice about someone from 17 years ago. When Sho asked if she knew anything, she replied that their current director was responsible for writing the community notices back then, so it would be better if they asked him directly. When they met with him, he wondered why they were looking for a notice from such a long time ago, but he told them not to mind. He had been somewhat troubled when writing it and was happy there was somebody interested in it. So he asked them to sit down. To learn that there were people who wanted to look at their notices, he was overjoyed that he had written them. Sho thought to himself that this person was so talkative that he might have been talking since birth. Ero asked if she should finish him off, but Sho said not yet. The director said he had his limits. It had been so long that he couldn't remember every small detail. However, if they were looking for something from 17 years ago, he knew exactly what it was. He said he could never forget that year. When Sho asked what was special about it, the director admitted that the Kusakabe family had a history beyond the fire that happened 12 years ago. Sho asked what kind of history and what else happened then. The director told them that the mother had 2 children, and Sho and Ero exchanged glances. The director added that no one knew who the father of those 2 was. Sho thought to himself that he already knew this since he had seen the hospital records. The director mentioned the virgin birth. He thought if it were true, it would be an act of God. Obviously, he wanted to include it in the community notice. Sho thought he might just be a gossip, but the director added that the girl was extremely suspicious. Miss Kusakabe was still young then and might have been hiding something. Some even wondered if she might have been pregnant with her teacher's kid. Not many people believed it was a virgin birth, and even her own mother couldn't believe it, which was pitiful. Because of this, Ero asked again if she should kill him now, and this time he replied, "On my signal." However, the director said that the woman was telling the truth, and he had proof. Sho was curious about this. The director recounted how they were pressured by the Church of Holy Soul not to report it. Sho was very shocked and asked why. The director replied that he wasn't a journalist, and a government official like him didn't have the ability to find the answer to this. He no longer needed to know why, because if the church was stopping him, then he had no choice but to stop. The director asked if they had ever heard of the state leaning on a community center like that before. Sho thought that Yona was the one who made those arrangements rather than the church, but he wondered if it really was a virgin birth and why it was covered up. What could have happened to his family? And how had his brother become a devil? Or maybe he was the reason why he became that way. The director was surprised at how serious Sho was because he had expected him to talk to Ero. Sho stood up and said they were leaving, so Ero followed him. But when he stood up, something strange suddenly happened. It was an Adala link and the surroundings changed. An infernal face Sho, and when it smiled at him, he realized that this might be his mother. He called the infernal mother and asked what happened to her. Flashback to 17 years ago. Mari was at the hospital when the doctor confirmed if she really didn't know who the father of her child was. She asked if she had so many men that she couldn't tell who it was. She was surprised because she looked like she was still attending school. Mari was shocked by what she said and denied it. She explained that she had no idea what was happening. She clarified that she hadn't had any experience with any man at all. The doctor replied that it wouldn't change the fact that there was a child growing inside her. If they conducted tests, they would know if she was still a virgin or not. Mari stood up and said she also wanted to know what was happening. After a while, the doctors there discussed the situation. They were puzzled because they had never heard about a virgin pregnancy before. Nevertheless, based on the test results, what she said was true. But they said it was impossible to believe this. Even her parents weren't convinced. And because of that, they disowned her. Perhaps they were extremely strict. So, they felt bad for her. Meanwhile, Mari was surprised when she felt the baby in her womb kick. She looked at him and talked to him as him continued to grow. Just then, a nurse arrived to ask how she was feeling. The nurse called her Abe-san, but she replied that she wasn't Abe anymore, which shocked the nurse. She explained that her parents didn't believe it was a virgin pregnancy at all. They said they wouldn't have a daughter who got knocked up by some nobody. That's why they disowned her, and she could no longer use the name Abe. The nurse couldn't believe this, saying it was awful. Nevertheless, Mari just laughed. The nurse was surprised by her reaction, saying she shouldn't just laugh it off. She answered that the truth was, they were still paying for her delivery and aftercare, so she knew she was being a burden to them. The nurse couldn't respond to this. Mari added that they say relationships end when money runs out, but in her opinion, money doesn't always run out just because a relationship ends. She smiled and said she should write that down. The nurse replied that if she was struggling, they were there for her. And so Mari bowed and expressed her appreciation. Again, the baby kicked in her belly, so she talked to him because he liked to kick so much. Mari thought he would use his feet for everything. The nurse thought the baby was just cheering for his mother, and Mari agreed. Mari was delighted when she heard the word mommy. However, she suddenly started feeling unwell, and when the nurse asked what was wrong, she thought it was time. So, within moments, she went straight to the delivery room where the doctor encouraged her to push. It happened quickly, and they immediately saw the baby's head. They kept instructing Mari to take deep breaths, and she complied. Nevertheless, she couldn't help but scream from the pain. Good thing she delivered a healthy baby. Those present discussed how the breathing and heart rate were both normal, and they couldn't believe it. They had heard of a child born covered in flames, so they were curious what kind of child she would have. The doctor then visited Mari to check on her, but her first question was how the baby was doing. He answered that the baby was the picture of health, which relieved Mari. While still lying in the hospital bed, she asked what had happened to her. "Good question," said the doctor, but they still didn't know the answer. Mari became sad because of this. The doctor added that although he wasn't very knowledgeable about it, there was a pre-cataclysm legend for that kind of event, and Mari was curious about it. The doctor told a story about another virgin birth, and apparently, the one who told the woman about her pregnancy was a servant of God, an angel, and her child was born as a savior, a hero who came to save the whole world. Mari was impressed by the story and said that meant she was the mother of a savior. "Not too shabby," he replied. Finally, Mari got to lull her child. She cradled the baby and thought about what to name him. The baby suddenly cried just as the door to the room opened. Mari was shocked to see that her mother had come. Her mother couldn't believe she had gone through with the pregnancy, a child that nobody wanted. Mari didn't respond to this. Her mother couldn't accept that she didn't even know who the father was. She asked what kind of whorish life was she hiding from her. She called her a pitiful and filthy woman. She couldn't accept that this was how Mari repaid her and her father. She said Mari ignored her parents' wishes and delivered a child that nobody wanted. Mari just looked away while her mother added that she chose a filthy brat left by garbage over her own parents. She approached and pointed at the baby, which startled Mari. She held the child tightly and said not to touch him. Her mother replied, asking who would want to touch him since he was disgusting. She said this was the perfect chance to cut Mari out of her life for good. But she would give her one last piece of advice, which was that this child would only bring misfortune to her life. She left, slamming the door on her way out. Mari hugged her child tightly and said it was okay and that the baby wasn't unwanted. She said the world needed the baby because the child was the hero who would save it. Because of that, she named the child Shinra. They both ended up crying together. Fast forward to when Sho was born. While Shinra was just looking at his sibling, the hospital staff were gossiping about the identity of their father. They said the mother didn't know who the father was of the child, who was also peering through the window. They couldn't understand why, because she didn't seem like the type of woman who went around. Meanwhile, Shinra was overjoyed when he saw his baby sibling. The scene changed to when the family was at the park. Shinra couldn't help but stare at his brother. He was delighted because Sho was so tiny and very cute. Mari said that Sho was the little angel who came for them. Shinra smiled when she mentioned Sho being an angel, and if that was the case, he needed to be a hero who would protect him. His mother agreed, saying he was the strongest hero after all. "Yep," he replied. Nevertheless, she reiterated that she was serious and that he was a hero. Shinra blushed when he heard that, then ran around the park and kicked in the air. Sho just watched him. Back to the present time, Sho was facing the infernal that was his mother. She said those were her memories, with him and Shinra. Young Shinra was determined to become a hero who would protect him and their mother. Sho mentioned the legend from before the cataclysm, where a virgin gave birth to a savior. Again, it was explained that the cataclysm was the merging of the world with Adala, a world of ideas, and that the cataclysm had happened once before. This meant their world was mixed up with concepts from people of the past. Therefore, Shinra might be a projection of people's concept of a savior. She added that Shinra wasn't just a hero to him, but an actual hero. Nevertheless, he remembered that Shinra was called a devil, a matricidal devil. So Sho wondered why he ended up that way. Sho thought about this and became curious if he was also a virgin birth. He was still facing the smiling infernal when suddenly a feather appeared. It flew and hit Sho, gradually forming into a large wing like that of an angel. Sho said that his brother was an actual hero, but no one else knew the truth. Therefore, he decided to guide and protect him. He asked the infernal, whom he called Mother, if she agrees with him. The surroundings were enveloped in darkness, and she promised that she would stay with Shinra. Then, the darkness completely covered everything, and the Adala link disappeared. Sho then called Arrow to leave, and the director couldn't believe it. When Arrow asked if something happened, Sho admitted it. He said the world wasn't going to end yet because he had found his answer. He was certain there was someone out there trying to deny the truth about his brother's existence. And there's not that many people who would do that. So when they went out, he declared that it's time to fight back. Moving to Asakusa, at the temporary covert headquarters of Company 8, Captain Obi addressed the group. He explained that if the large pillars were the heralds of the cataclysm, and they're supposed to be expecting 8 of them, then there's only 1 pillar left. Every member of Company 8 listened carefully. Obi added that the fire force was established to protect the Tokyo Empire. Therefore, it was impossible for them to just sit there. So, he would make it plain and simple. He called on Shinra and asked him to recite the motto of the fire force, which he did. He shouted that their duty was to protect the lives and property of citizens. Because of that, the captain said they would return the empire to the people. This was the battle to reclaim the empire. Arthur asked Shinra, whom he called Devil, if he could do it. He replied that he wasn't a devil. Back to show, Arrow asked what Shinra really was. He answered that Shinra was the hero who would save the entire world.